Hello and welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop solution for an English medium UPSC Civil Services aspirant. Today, as part of your Hindu analysis, we'll be discussing 6 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper Delhi edition. But before we begin, as always, an update for you, which is that as part of our free special classes which are happening on the Unacademy app itself, we'll be discussing these topics at these times. So at 1 p.m., Chethan sir will be discussing IR fundamentals and he will be discussing a very important issue which is India-Pakistan disputes and tensions. Thereafter at 5 p.m. with History Revisited, I'll be discussing the main issues, the concepts and the nuances related to the Indus Valley civilization. And thereafter at 6 p.m. we have Economy Simplified and RBI will be discussed by Shyam sir. And under Polity Basics at 8 p.m. there will be a discussion about one nation, one election, a very interesting discussion that way. So the link to all of these sessions at 1, 5, 6 and 8 p.m. is given in the description box. You just have to go to the Unacademy app and you can join us live. These are free sessions totally for your preparation, to add to your preparation constructively. So I hope that you'll be a part of it today. We'll keep on telling you every day what are the topics we are covering. Till 12th, we have all the schedule already in the community page itself. I hope that you're liking these sessions, and if you are, like, share and subscribe the session generally. Now with this, let's look at the newspaper. Now if you open today's newspaper, just to tell you how to read the newspaper also, you will find a lot of articles around one issue, which is fiscal federalism. Now on the front page itself, you have the concept of the Chalo Delhi movement by the Karnataka CM itself. And it is related to, again, the concept of borrowing and fiscal federalism and the state and center relationship. There were 3 articles related to it, but I've picked up the one which is relevant for you, gives us a certain static understanding also, and gives us an opportunity to understand the larger picture. So you don't have to read each and every article which is related to a topic, the most relevant one. However, the first topic we discuss is going to be a very relevant one with the concept of delimitation itself. And as Sarmat will be discussing one nation, one election, this may be the static portion for you for the evening session. Thereafter, we have 4 small and straightforward topics, and we will keep on adding again this tax to GDP ratio, a very important concept, then the concept of biofuels and ethanol blending, then something we discussed yesterday has been now passed, and thereafter we have the Ramayana circuit which has been developed, a very important concept within art and culture. This is the current affairs aspect. So 6 topics, but these are 2 very big topics, and the second topic has multiple articles. There's a rebuttal from the center also. We'll discuss what is the rebuttal on this article. This has been written from a pro-Kerala perspective, in the sense that it has been written from the state perspective, and we will try to balance it from the center perspective, and we'll discuss the issues around it in that regard. So the first topic, as you always know, I will give you the basics, thereafter the nitty-gritty, and thereafter in the concept of revision. Now the first topic is understanding the delimitation exercise. It's a good article because it gives you everything related to delimitation, the static portion of it, and thereafter we can in a way revise the static and also discuss the issues which are surrounding it. Now under article, now I'm basically teaching you the static portion of this. Under article 82 and under article the 170, under article 82 and article 170, this is for the center, this is for the state. Under article 82 and under article 170, the constitution mandates that there needs to be a process of what we call as delimitation. Now delimitation basically is the process of doing 3 things. Now we'll go slow, we'll understand everything what we have to. So when we talk about delimitation, there are 3 basic aspects here. The first aspect is deciding the number of seats, in the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies. On the other hand, it also redraws or decides the boundaries of constituencies, and further what we see is the concept of this SC/ST reserved seats are also decided by the delimitation commission, as it will be established by the government of India and the president will appoint it. So the delimitation process has three basic aspects to it. First is the number of seats which will be there in the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies for each of the states itself. Second, the boundaries of the constituencies itself. And second, the third, which is the concept of the SC/ST seats, reserved seats with joint electorate. How many will be there in the Lok Sabha and in the state assemblies? So it's a very important process as mandated under Article 82 and Article 170. Now, under Article 82 and 170, there is also one more mandate which I'll discuss. But before that, I want to discuss why is delimitation important. Why is delimitation important? Delimitation is important and it is based on the principle and the concept of one citizen, one vote, one value. That basically every citizen should have one vote and the value of that one vote should not vary according to the state or the territorial boundaries of India. Basically, it should not be that a person from UP, if he is voting, his vote has more value than a person, for example, from MP. And for the same reason, the number of seats are decided by the delimitation committee or the commission, and at the same point of time, they also decide the boundaries. Because by changing the boundaries, they try to keep the ratio of population more or less constant. As of right now, the distribution is one vote is based on 10.1 lakh population. We round it off to 10 lakhs. 1 million equals to one vote. Basically, they divide the constituencies in a way that the population within that constituency is such that one vote per million is there, and this value has increased over a period of time, and they want to keep this value constant. So this ratio, one vote equals to 10 lakh, means that they will create constituencies in a way that this ratio does not change or this concept does not change. So the concept of seats, boundaries, and the concept of reservation of seats is very, very important for the whole democratic process of India itself under 82 and 170 itself. But the concept of one citizen, one vote and one value is equally important in that regard, because this is the essence of democracy in that sense. Now, under Article 82 and 170, there's also one more mandate. And the next mandate is that the delimitation process should happen after every census. After every census, the delimitation process should happen so that this ratio is kept whatever it is kept, and over and above that there is a little bit of what we call as growth in the seats also, and more than that the population to vote ratio does not change or remains constant across India. So the concept of delimitation process was mandated by 82 and 170 to be done after every census. We did it after the 1951 census, we did after 61, but after 1971 census, we saw a trend, and the trend was that if the population of a state keeps on increasing, that is not good. The fertility rate above 2 is not good, and therefore there needs to be a way we can control our population. Now, if you control your population, and every state has a mandate to control it, then in a way it becomes a paradox or it becomes a contradiction, because if you want to increase your seats in the Lok Sabha, or if you want to increase the seats in your state legislative assembly, you will not make sure that your population gets controlled. So population explosion would be a problem. So what the parliament came up with as a solution was, they froze the census. They said that through the 42nd amendment, they argued in 1976 that we freeze this census that the number of seats in the Lok Sabha will not increase proportional to the census data. The census data even later would be based on 1971, which would basically disincentivize the process of not controlling your population and incentivize what is called as demographic performance, that you control your population and have what we call as basic measures for bringing down the fertility rate of India to a level which is acceptable, and the resources of India are not also strained in that regard. This was done till 2000, but when 2000 came, we came up with another amendment, which is basically the 84th amendment, and under the 84th amendment itself, what we see in 2002, we will fix it to 2026. We will say that we will again not change the census data. We will keep the census data at 1971 level till 2026. Now in 2002, 2026 seemed to be a faraway concept, but we are now in 2024. And now in 2024, the question again comes up that what will happen to the delimitation process. So just to repeat the static portion here, you have to remember the concept of Article 82 and 170, very, very important that ways. Thereafter, you should know that it is seats, boundaries and reserve seats which the delimitation commission or the process decides. And further, the concept of one citizen, one vote and one value is there. This is very, very important for your mains examination. And thereafter, delimitation process should have been done after every census. We did it after 2 census, but the 3rd census we decided that we need to freeze this process because this does not allow the population of India to get controlled. And therefore, through the 42nd amendment and the 84th amendment, in 2000, we fixed it till 2000, then we fixed it till 2026. But now this 2026 period is coming and the 2021 census has been delayed because of COVID-19. So now there's a conundrum in front of the government generally. Now, the problem is that today if we do delimitation, the concept of, I think, static portion should be clear to you. What are the basic values which it embodies and what is the basic concept itself. Now, you need to understand something, that we are now in a very big pickle and we are now in a very, very tight spot, because in 2026, we have to go for delimitation. The next census is 2031, but people are arguing that by 2026 we should have the census, and maybe we will do delimitation after in 2026 or in 2027. Now the problem is that over this period of 1971 census and 2026, if the census is taken, there's a very dangerous trend which has emerged in Indian population. And this is the trend, which is that between 1971 to 2011, the problem is that there has been a population explosion in this sector. In North India, there has been a population explosion with 138% increase in the population itself. And this is not that severe in the peninsular sector. So in South India, what we are seeing is that there is only 56, 75, 94%, 100% increase maximum. But there's a population explosion with 166% increase in the Rajasthan sector. Now, the data for Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh is not there. But the fact of the matter is that this tells us a very dangerous trend. This would mean, and this is the basic gist of this article, then I will read out the basic points to you. See, if we go for 2026 and if the census is either 2011 or we go for 2031 or we go for 2027, one thing is very clear. One thing is very, very clear, that the northern states will exponentially gain seats because delimitation will happen according to population. And the southern states, which is the problem here, and the concept of federalism comes into question. The southern states, on the other hand, the problem is that they have over a period of time done better to control their population. That is what India wanted. And on demographic performance, they have done better. However, if the delimitation happens either way, their seats either remain constant or go down or increase proportionally lower. If there's an increase of 50% here, it will be only 2 to 3% here. Now, this is a problem because the mandate which came in 1976 was control the population because that is important for India generally. However, the northern states did not do that and the peninsular states did it. Now, they have been and they will basically in a way pay a penalty for, and understand this point, they will pay a penalty for doing something good. Bringing down the fertility rate of India was important and the southern states performed really well in that. But now when it will come to seats distribution, the concept or the seats will go down or remain constant. And there's a formula which this article has given. It says we can do two things. Either we keep the seats at 543 itself. We keep the seats at 543 itself in the Lok Sabha and we reappropriate, which is we take into the consideration the number of population in 2026, we readjust, then the seats will get redistributed because the population data will be taken into account. In that context, where we do not increase the seats, UP gains 11 seats, Bihar gains 10 seats, Rajasthan 6, MP 4. But now the states which have performed well in the demographic performance, in the concept of controlling their population, -8, -8, -8, -1, -2, -2, -1. So Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Kerala, Karnataka, Punjab, Himachal and Uttarakhand all lose seats which have been gained because the number of seats remain constant. So the seat gain of these states will be at the cost of the states which are smaller also here. Punjab, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand are also there. It's not specific to South India. And if we take into account the population of India as of 2011, we get close to 848 seats and that would be the new seats after the delimitation process itself, after redrawing of boundaries. And in that, UP gains, and you see, UP gains 63, Bihar 39, Rajasthan 25, 23, 10, and you see Kerala gains nothing, Himachal gains nothing, 13, 5 and 2. Now look at this and look at this. The increase in seats is exponentially higher in the states which have done worse. This is the problem and that is why this article is very, very important. The skewed data or the paradox here is that if the states which have done better in population are getting penalized for doing that. And the states which did not control their population are now gaining a lot of seats and in the Lok Sabha the seats matter. Basically this is power. So the power distribution and the power dynamics in that sense also changes. So therefore, the delimitation process has to find a solution for something like this. Now, there is no tangible solution right now. It is not your job or my job to think about this. However, the government of India has to find a way that the states which have done better don't get penalized for doing something which was mandated to them. This is a very important point you need to understand. This was mandated to the states that you decrease your population, you decrease the fertility rate so that the population comes under control. However, the states which have done it are now facing a problem and rather the states which did not even think about it are now gaining seats. So before I go into the nitty-gritty of this topic, you need to understand the basics here. Again, I'm repeating so that you understand the core issue. Mains level questions can come from this area. Under Article 82 and 170, it says seats, boundary and the reserve seats will be done through the delimitation process. Under delimitation process, it is important because it keeps the one citizen, one vote, one value concept and value alive within democracy. Now, under delimitation, under 82 and 170, it says that every census should be taken into account and after every census, delimitation commission should be established and the number of seats should be changed. But once we saw that in 61, 51 and 51, 61 and 71, that the states were not doing that, we rather froze it so as to discourage the population increase in these states. But what has happened is, though we discourage, there has been no change. And on the other hand, through the Constitution Amendment 42nd and 84th, what has happened is that the delimitation date is now coming, but we have a scenario something like this, wherein the population explosion in the northern states are now going to either impact the seats if we don't change the number of seats, and it at the same point of time will impact the power dynamics in the Lok Sabha if the number of seats are changed. Now, this is the problem. Now, in the exam, there are two types of questions which can come. One, a neutral one, a positive one, or a negative one. Now, in a neutral one, they will ask you what is delimitation, that question which I have given you basically in the end, the challenges which come through delimitation. But they can also give you a positive assertion and a negative assertion, that the process of delimitation has been undercut by the population explosion in India. This is a negative connotating. You have to either support it, you have to take a balanced perspective that way. It can be a positive one also, which says that the northern states or the southern states have not performed to the level they should in order to make delimitation easier. Though it is sounding as a positive statement, it is still a negative statement itself. So the point is, you have to understand the tone of the question. The question matters here is that how do you make sure that you don't penalize states for the mandated concept to them, which was to decrease their population or keep it constant, or make sure that the population explosion, the fertility rate does not go above 2. And therefore, here there is a totally different story. This is why 2026 and this mandate is going to be very, very important to understand. So I hope that you understand this perspective and the basic static portion here. Now I'll go into the nitty-gritty and tell you the basic points. I give you that so that when you get the PPT itself or you have access to this PPT, then you can use it as a repository for your current affairs. Now, what is delimitation? This is again the third revision I'm doing with you as a process of your learning. Process of fixing the number of seats, boundaries of territorial constituencies in each state for Lok Sabha and legislative assemblies. It also decides the number of reserved seats for SCs and STs. This is 82-170. It says that it should be readjusted after every census, and the delimitation process was done in 51, 61, in 71. But in 71, the delimitation commission was basically in this major contradiction that the population was not increasing. So what we did was, in order to keep the concept of one citizen, one vote, one value alive, which has been changing. You can see that according to 51, 61 and 71, 494 seats, 522 seats and 543 seats. According to the population, 36 crore, 43 crores, 54 crores. Now India has more than 121 crores. The point is, the value which comes today is from 7.3, it increased to 8.4. It is now average population for per seat, which is per seat, which I argued as one vote. That value becomes 10 lakhs or 10.1 lakhs. So here, wherever I was saying, just to qualify what I said, this one vote concept is one seat, the value of that one vote. That is what I meant. So this seat and vote concept I used interchangeably. So seat, vote, 10.1 lakh population. Within that same constituency, one seat should have 10.1 lakh population. Therefore, the value of that one vote is in that sense proportional, and in that sense this type of a ratio comes in. Now, the problem which emerged in 71 was that in order to encourage population control measures in the state itself, we wanted to make sure that the number of seats do not increase for bad performing states. So we wanted states to be discouraged to increase their population. And for the same reason, under the 42nd Amendment, under the 84th Amendment, the 1971 census data was taken into account. Now, in normal course of events, it should be 2031, but with 2026 very close, and maybe the census will happen in 2026 itself, we can take any form of action. But the core issue which comes out is the table which I showed you, which is either you lose seats or you gain seats exponentially, and therefore Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, MP and Rajasthan have had a greater increase in population than Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And therefore, the core issue, this is the main issue, that the federal principle should not lead to the feeling of disenchantment or disillusionment, that we wanted to help India reduce its fertility rate. We did it, but we are now getting penalized for something which we did for the greater good of India in that regard. So, before we move to the second topic, let's discuss a way forward. See, there are two things. Either don't increase the seats, but the problem is then the states lose seats itself. Either you increase the seats, but the concept is then there's no exponential, there's an exponential increase for these states, and on the other hand, the states which have performed better are getting less seats. Now, the way forward here has to be a certain formula or a way in which this population explosion is taken into account. The concept of, if you remember, the concept which was there for the 15th Finance Commission, what they did was they introduced a concept of demographic performance. And they said that whichever state has not done well in demographic performance, the dissolution of taxes or the dissolution of money would be lower. And therefore, something like this as a solution needs to be figured out for this issue. The concept is very simple. Delimitation is the static portion. The issue is much bigger, which is the aspect related to how do we take into account the population data, and how do we not penalize states which have done better, because they did what was mandated to them and not something on their own. And therefore, we have to have a way forward in which these peninsular states or smaller states which have done better should not be penalized. With this, I hope this topic is totally clear. I've taken up close to half an hour for this because I want you to understand the static portion here. Now, with this, we move to this major topic which has been there in the news throughout this paper, which is the concept of fiscal federalism. Now, here the core issue, again I am going into the nitty-gritty of it, is the core issue is about borrowing. We already know that there has been a lot of tussle, literal tussle between the center and the state over GST compensation, over the concept of what should be the way money should be devolved to them. There has been a proper issue here, wherein we are seeing that in the GST Council itself, they are saying that you give us more money, the compensation amount is also coming slower and needs to be released. But here it's not about that. Here there's a curious case of Kerala, and generally the Karnataka issue is also stemming from the same area, and it is related to a word. And that word is the concept of net borrowing ceiling. Net borrowing ceiling. I'll write it down for you. It is called net borrowing ceiling. Now, this concept of net borrowing ceiling is rather related to the concept of how does a state borrow. See, when under the constitutional mandate under 293, under Article 293 and 293(3), these states have a certain mandate when it comes to borrowing. The states of India cannot borrow from external sources. Though there are exceptions to this, in principle, external sources are not available to them. They can only borrow from internal, which is within India, internal sources. And there's a capping to this. It can't be that a state is borrowing more than the center itself, because that would be dangerous for the fiscal health of India. Now, under 293, 293(3), and what the 15th Finance Commission decided was that a state can borrow up to 3% of its gross state GDP, and a further relaxation of 0.5% was given if your power sector is performing quite well. This is immaterial to us right now, but the fact is the gross state GDP 3% up to you can borrow from internal sources in that regard. Now, when we talk about internal sources and the concept of how 3% and further relaxation. What are the sources which are available to the state? This is a very important question. What are the sources which are available to the state? When we talk about the consolidated funds of a state, the sources which are available to a state is either borrow from the center, which a lot of states have done. Then you can do what are called open market operations or open market transactions. Open market transactions means basically the concept of securities. The RBI also does it. The securities, the bond market, they can go for open market operations, OMOs as they are called, open market transaction. Now, securities which the state may release or it would take from the RBI, there could be a transaction between the RBI and the states, and in the RBI and state interaction comes within the open market transaction. Now, further, they have what is called as public accounts. Public accounts means that if you are a state employee, if you're the government employee of a state, you give PPF, you give other forms of contribution into certain social security schemes. That money also goes to the state and is kept by the states. How you have the public accounts of how central government employees contribute to certain things such as the GPF and all, the same type of GPF we have in states also. So that is public accounts, and you also have small schemes which can come in. For example, in you have the National Saving Certificate for the center, Kisan Vikas Patra. That way states can also release smaller saving certificates which can be prescribed by people, and therefore public accounts also comes in. But public accounts is basically your and my money held by the state. They're giving us a return on it. It may be locked in for a certain period, but the state cannot lose this money because it is my money and your money. You understand this point? The public accounts is not the money of the state. It is you and me parking certain savings into a certain scheme because we are getting certain returns. Now, there is also the concept that after you have taken from the center open market operations and public accounts, this should not go over 3% and 3.5% maximum. But the net borrowing ceiling is basically the numerical manifestation of this 3%. That if 3% decides, for example, it is 1 lakh crore, 1 lakh crore is the net borrowing ceiling, and every time you take something, that ceiling goes down. So basically, just before I go into the concept of net borrowing ceiling, the Article 293 and 293(3) of the Indian Constitution mandates that the states can only borrow from internal sources. Exceptional sources, you have external sources, but generally they have to borrow from internal sources. Under that, the borrowing options is center, open market operations and public accounts, which is basically held by them. And the state basically cannot go over 3% of the gross state GDP under the 15th Finance Commission. I hope this point is clear to you. Now think of it, the net borrowing, this net borrowing ceiling, think of it like a counter. Think of it like a counter. Every time you borrow, it goes down. So I started at 1 lakh crore. Now I borrowed, it then goes away, it goes down as you borrow. Now what is the core issue here? All of this is state, it is clear and it is uniform for every state. But what is the core issue here where Kerala is not liking it? There's a rebuttal also from the state which I will tell you. Why is that Kerala is not liking this concept and what is the main issue here? Now, let me erase this. I need the space for this. Okay. Now, understand it like this. That if the net borrowing ceiling is in a certain place, I take from center, it takes away a little bit of this. That is justified. If I've taken a loan, according to Kerala, according to a lot of southern states, taking a loan from the center, sure, this should go down. Perfect. Now, the other is I go for open market operations or I go for open market borrowing. They are saying this is also justified. It should reduce further. No issues. This is mandated under 293(3). Perfect. But what the center has recently mandated, that this 3% also includes two things. And this is where the bone of contention is. It says that if you borrow from public accounts, which is that you take the public accounts money, the money which the state has in the form of public accounts, and you take something out of it and use it in certain, whatever it may be, a revenue expenditure or a capital expenditure, this will also reduce this. It's like an allowance, that it's like your parents, your parents have given you 1,000 rupees in allowance. They said that if you take it from the center, if you take it from open market operations, it's okay. But if you are taking from public accounts also, that will also reduce the amount, and basically the net borrowing ceiling will be touched. You don't want to reach this point wherein you have no money to borrow and you have touched your ceiling. You had to borrow 1 lakh crores and you've already borrowed 1 lakh crores. So this counter is reducing, your borrowing capacity is reducing, and you can use the analogy of other way around, which is increasing to a ceiling. Either way, it doesn't matter, ceiling or a point. The other bone of contention, which this is where the first issue comes in. The other bone of contention wherein Kerala is making an issue out of it is that if a state enterprise, and this is very interesting, if a state-run enterprise, for example, a special purpose vehicle, or for example, a PSP, not a PSU is under the center, if you have a company which has been created, or there's an investment bank which has been created, if there's an investment agency which has been created by the state, and if it does borrowing, now in a way the state is not borrowing. What is borrowing is the entity, is the entities. So this all three is done by, for example, Kerala. This is done by Tamil Nadu. This is done by the state. However, this borrowing is not done by the state, it is done by the enterprise. Note this point, it is done by the enterprise. But what the center has mandated is that if a state enterprise borrows, it will still be counted here. And this is where Kerala is performing very badly. Because there's a body in Kerala, I'll give you the name, it's called the Kerala Infrastructure Investment Fund Board, the KIIFB. The Kerala Infrastructure Investment Board basically is a fund which has been created, or the board which has been created, which takes it's a statutory body created by the state itself. It does all infrastructure activities. But what it does is, it does extra borrowing than the state itself. And this is where the problem is coming. This extra budgetary borrowing should not be, according to Kerala, and that is their argument, should not be added to this 3%. But the state is saying, because this is a state-run enterprise, it is a statutory body, it could be a special purpose vehicle also, it is borrowing, you are borrowing. This is a very interesting tussle which is going on. See, this much is justified, but public accounts is at the perusal of the state itself. The government of India also takes out money out of its public accounts. But the fact is, a state-run enterprise, a statutory body, if it is doing extra budgetary borrowing, it then should be counted under the 3% cap. So this ceiling which you have, this counter which you have, which reduces by taking more and more, or it increases to a point over which you cannot go, that is why it's called a ceiling. The fact of the matter is, the center open market borrowing is okay, but the tussle is over this. This is a very interesting discussion, and I'll repeat myself so as to give you the larger picture. What are we trying to discuss here? See, states can borrow, the center borrows, that's not a bad practice. Borrowing for capital expenditure is a very good thing, because you're creating assets. Now, you can borrow till a point that has been decided by the 15th Finance Commission as the 3% of gross state GDP. Now, that is a ceiling over which you cannot go. That 3% of state GDP could come to hypothetically 100 rupees, for example. Now, that 100 rupees is not more, 101 is not possible, then you are doing something which is not mandated by the 15th Finance Commission. There would be penalties for it. And if you're under that 100, you can borrow more and more as much as you want. That is not an issue. Now, how do you reach that ceiling, or how does that money gets borrowed is important. Now, if you take from center, obviously you should reach that ceiling, or that capacity should be taken away from you. If you are taking under 293 open market borrowing, open market operations, securities, sure, it should again reduce or should increase to the ceiling. But what the states are arguing is that public accounts borrowing should not be taken into 3%. Further, what Kerala is specifically arguing is that because a state-run enterprise is doing extra budgetary borrowing, it should not be added to 3%. Now, there are two things here. This is a interesting solution, but a dangerous one also. This way, the state could not borrow anything, but the statutory body would borrow everything. And this body can borrow from multiple sources. It can do more. It is not bound by the constitutional mandate. This is where the center is very straightforward in saying that, and there's an article in the same newspaper in the front, in the second page itself, it says Kerala is the worst performing fiscal actor in India, in the sense that it has found a solution, a loophole in this whole concept, and it is using it to do extra budgetary borrowing. The issue is here of extra budgetary borrowing, and therefore you need to understand this is a very relevant question for GS paper 3. It's related to 3 and 2 both because it's a governance issue also. So before I go into the nitty-gritty, I'm again repeating myself. It's the question that can or should a state-run enterprise, a statutory body or a special purpose vehicle created by a state be counted as the net borrowing ceiling or be counted within the borrowing capacity of a state? This question, the 15th Finance Commission very straightforward says no. The constitutional subject-wise under the lists, it goes under the state list. So it is the mandate of the state. However, the center has not been allowing the states to get more and more money, and this 3% plus 0.5% has been applied. And therein lies the tussle which is now in the Supreme Court. It's a sub judice issue. Let us see what does the Supreme Court say. The Supreme Court could say that public accounts and state enterprise as extra budgetary borrowing should not be counted under the 3%. It could also say that it should be counted under 3%. The solution is going to come in the next 5 to 6 days. Let us see. It's going to be a very interesting moment for a UPSC aspirant because we can see this in action in that regard. So let's look at the basic points of this article. So we know that Kerala has moved to the Supreme Court over the net borrowing ceiling issue and the concept of borrowing from all sources and what sources should be taken into account. The NBC, which is net borrowing ceiling, is a limit of borrowing for states from all sources including open market borrowing. The center has decided to deduct liabilities, which is every time, as I said, negative. The word negative I use for the same reason. That is why I showed you it as a counter negative. It is deductions out of that ceiling. If they take out from the public accounts also. In addition to that, borrowing by state-owned enterprises where the principal or the interest are serviced out of the budget or through assignment of taxes or cesses should also be deducted from the NBC. And therefore, Kerala has a specific issue with this clause that if, this is the technical terminology, I gave you a simple point, if somehow a state-owned enterprise, state-run enterprise is taking a loan, it should also be deducted from NBC. And the concept is under 293(3), it says that the center has the right to decide if any loan can be raised by the state or not, if it already has an outstanding loan. And therefore, Kerala, the curious case of Kerala is that the Kerala Infrastructure Investment Fund has done a lot of, more than what the state has taken, done a lot of extra budgetary borrowing, and now the center is very simple and very simply saying that you have done something, you have already crossed your ceiling, we are not going to let you get more money out of any other source. And what Kerala is saying that if you are going to do that, then how do we pay pensions? How do we pay for welfare schemes? So the argument of Kerala as argued in the article itself is that under entry 43 state list, public debt of the state is basically a state issue. So therefore public accounts should not be taken. Under 220, this is not important for you, but 266(2), it says that any money which is collected under public accounts should be also available to the state, and therefore it should not again be deducted from the NBC. But here it's not the issue of public accounts. That is still a minor issue. The larger issue here is of state owned enterprises. Now today we've done these two big topics. I want to consolidate them with you, and then we'll move to the prelims section itself. The first topic we discussed was delimitation. I'm again repeating with you. This is the fourth revision we had. Seats, boundaries, and reserved seats all are decided by the boundaries of the constituency, all are decided by the delimitation commission. Now delimitation commission therefore has the mandate to make sure that the one vote, one citizen and one value is taken. Therefore each seat should have the same population ratio, 10.1 lakh, and therefore so that the value of that one vote remains constant in an implied way throughout India in that sense. So the seat concept is pushed together to make it the concept of one vote should have value everywhere the same. Now delimitation should happen under constitutional mandate of 82 and 170 after every census, but we stopped after 1971 when we saw that the population was increasing exponentially. It had to be controlled. So we disincentivized the process of census data be taken to increase power in the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies, and therefore 42nd and 84th amendment both till 2000 and till 2026 froze the concept of the census data being 1971. But with 2026 coming, the question comes in, and the census of 2021 has not been taken also. Now the concept here is that because there has been a population explosion in UP, MP, in Rajasthan, in Bihar, these states gain quite a lot out of any form of delimitation, and the states, peninsula states such as Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, they lose along with Uttarakhand and Punjab and Himachal. They lose in this process, and therefore we need to find a balance for this. This solution will come as per time. Let us see how does the center come up with it. Now the second topic we discussed was the concept of NBC, which is net borrowing ceiling, and the concept of how much a state can borrow. 3% from certain sources, but these sources, the question with regards to public accounts and the questions with regards to state run enterprise or state owned enterprise is now becoming a problem. Should state-owned enterprises which do extra budgetary borrowing, which is not correct also, in a way should be counted under this 3%. Should it be counted under NBC? This question is in front of the Supreme Court. Let us see what happens. We'll be here again with the same issue and discussing what actually happened in that regard. With this, let's look at the prelims bite section. I've done those topics very thoroughly so that you understand them well. The newspaper generally did not have any other article mains worthy for discussion, so we'll discuss the smaller topics now. The first one is encouraging news, which is that as we become a bigger and bigger economy, the income of the people will increase, so therefore the taxation will also increase. So tax to GDP ratio has become better. Tax to GDP ratio has now touched 11.7% of GDP. So basically taxation as a numerator or as a part of GDP has now become 11.7%, which is a very good thing. And personal income tax collection again stands at 28% for this year and will go till 22%, which again gone up from 8% to 12 to 16 to now 20. This is what you only need to know. Other than that static portion, you already know, which is the concept of taxation vis-a-vis GDP. If you have a very good, if it's reaching 20-25%, it's a very good percentage. So taxation as part of the GDP should always be higher, and 11.7% it is there. That is the revenue secretary, which is a very interesting development, and the argument he's given is, as India becomes a bigger economy, people get more and more income, and therefore this ratio will equally increase. Equitable direct taxation. He also argued that we have not changed the tax system too much. That has allowed for people to understand the taxation system better. The second topic is a very interesting development with regards to how we are going for biofuels. The Prime Minister has recently argued that we will increase the percentage of domestic gas in primary energy from 6 to 15%. But he talked about the global biofuel and alliance which was started by India itself at G20 itself. And more than that, this is the thing, or this is the point I wanted to make in front of you, which was that ethanol blending into our fuel or in petrol will increase from, or has increased from 1.5% to 12% in 2023, and it will further increase to 20%. This will help do two things. First, the ethanol blending, if not taken from food. The problem with ethanol is mostly the sources of ethanol right now are food crops, and that if mostly sugarcane in that regard. If we remove that and if we go for non-food crop based ethanol blending, it would be a very good thing, because then we can reduce the dependence on petrol imports and petrol generally in that regard. So the concept here is we are aiming for 20%. This can be used and this can be asked in the examination generally. Thereafter, we discussed this yesterday, 1 crore penalty or at least 3 years in prison. Now this has been passed by the Lok Sabha as it is. There has been no amendment. That is why I am discussing this with you. And he argued that the legislation will not be used against candidate. It will not be used or misused. That is the basic emotion behind it, that they will not misuse it. But there's a chance for that. We will see how this gets implemented. It has to go to the Rajya Sabha for its passing itself, or to get passed in that regard. Last but not the least is the discussion about a very interesting development. IRCTC is now basically offering and has launched a Ramayana circuit. There are multiple circuits which they have. Buddhist circuit, they have the Jain circuit. Now there's a Ramayana circuit after the Ram temple was inaugurated, and in this, on 4th February, they started with 122 tourists, 10 from UK, 52 from Portugal and 10 from India. Rather 60 from UK, 52 from Portugal and 10 from India. And it will go through this circuit in the form of, first they will go to Ayodhya obviously, and thereafter they will go to the Nandigram Hanuman Gadi or Bharat Hanuman temple itself. Then you have the Janki Mandir in Nepal's Janakpur. Thereafter it will go to Sitamarhi, then to Buxar, and then to Varanasi. So you can see from the Ram temple to Hanuman Gadi to the Bharat Hanuman temple in Nandigram, they have created a certain circuit. Maybe I'll discuss this circuit when we talk about the R-Pass session later, but I hope that you understand this very interesting development. You need to know where the circuit is going to in that regard for your prelims examination. So before I end the session and we look at the mains questions itself, just a very important reminder for everybody. At 1 p.m. India-Pakistan with Chethan sir. At 5 p.m. with me, Indus Valley Civilization on the app. Free of cost for everybody. Link is given in the description box. That 6 p.m. RBI with Shyam sir, and One Nation, One Election with Sarmat sir at 8 p.m. Do not miss these sessions. Be a part of this journey and use these sessions for your preparation. Now, 2 questions for you. Interesting, simple, straightforward. What is delimitation? What are the challenges in the Indian scenario? Very simple. We've discussed that quite in a very aggressive way. Fiscal federalism is the bedrock of federalism in India. Comment. This can be written from both negative and positive. What I want to see from you is a midway, how you will balance it, and you can always say that the Supreme Court is right now taking this under consideration. So with this, I would like to end the session. Thank you so much. I hope that you have understood everything. 2 very big articles, 2 very important articles. Thank you, take care, and bye-bye.